Hey guys, welcome back to Father Z. Today we're going to talk about something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Something that's real, that's common, and yet still feels like it lives in the shadows for a lot of people. We're talking about dads, specifically new dads, and what happens mentally when life changes, your identity shifts, and suddenly you're not just you anymore, you're someone's father. Now, here's the thing. When we talk about the early days of parenthood, most of the focus, rightfully so, is on mum. There are whole systems built around maternal care, and yet in those same moments, a lot of new dads are navigating something quietly and often alone. Stress, confusion, sadness, pressure to be the rock, the one who holds it all together. Maybe you're trying to be strong for your partner. Maybe you feel like you're not allowed to be overwhelmed, but you are. We all are sometimes. This episode is called Dads Get the Blues Too, because the truth is, paternal postnatal depression is a thing. Research backs it up. Approximately 10% of new fathers experience it. That's not a footnote, that's not a fringe issue, that's real. So today we're going to open that up. No shame, no stigma, just a real conversation about what that emotional load looks like for fathers, and how we can take care of ourselves, how we check in with each other, and how we move forward. We're going to talk through some of our own stories, moments where things didn't feel manageable, where we didn't have the tools yet, where we were just trying to hold it together at 2 a.m. with a crying baby, zero sleep, and a brain that felt like it was running on fumes. We'll also dig into the things that helped, whether that was therapy, journaling, exercise, reaching out to a community. And we've got a great guest joining us later, Dan Flanagan, founder of Dadless Soul, who talks openly about his own experiences and why it's important for us dads to talk about our feelings openly. Because this isn't just about surviving early fatherhood, it's about building the mental and emotional foundation to thrive in it. All right, let's get to it. Christopher, how are you this week?
I'm not too bad, actually, to be honest with you. How you doing, mate?
Yes, not too bad. It's been a good week. School started again today. We're recording this on Wednesday, so I'm hoping that I don't forget to go on the school run later. It felt really strange this morning getting up that early and getting ready for school again. Yesterday, ironing a week's worth of school clothes, which I haven't done in about 3 weeks. So that was all good. And also a moment of realizing how much time has passed. We packaged up the first car seat we ever bought to send back to Silver Cross. So they'll take your old items back, they'll refurbish them, they will pass them on to families who need them. But trying to package up a car seat and an Isofix is quite tricky. There are not many packaging bags that big that will not break or tear when you try and pack it up. It just brought back loads of memories about when we bought it. I've got loads of pictures on my phone of us putting one of my own childhood teddies into the car seat, into a baby carrier, all of these things when we were first expecting.
Yeah, I know. No, it's like time passes. Like it was my son's second birthday last week. So he's properly now a toddler. He has got the attitude of the toddler. He's got the independence of a toddler, and his favorite word now is just like no, kind of scream that. Yeah, particularly if you are trying to tell him that you can't have any more Easter eggs for the first time. They of course got way too many. I think have just come down from their new addiction to chocolate. So that's probably a parenting fail on my point, to be honest with you. But it was a lovely doing something I grew up with Easter egg hunts, which I got to do a first one there. So it was way more extravagant than it needed to be. That was for sure. But they loved it. I loved it.
Yeah,
So
we did an Easter egg hunt in the village. I say an Easter egg hunt, it was more like there were 15 pictures of Easter eggs kind of put up, and each one had a riddle which you had to solve. And then when you'd solved all of them, you could go and get it checked and go and get your Easter egg. So I suppose not technically a hunt, but it was good fun. It's certainly, not on any part of good parenting, but my son is not fussed by chocolate at all. So he's got some Easter eggs that people have bought him. He's got the one that we got on the hunt, the trail, whatever you want to call it. And when we asked him yesterday if he wanted a bit of one, he was like, "No, mummy, can I have one of the bananas we've just bought?" Which
okay.
is
Well
absolutely
done you.
amazing. But I don't think it's necessarily anything we've done. He just doesn't have a sweet tooth.
It's lovely doing those events. We used to have the duck race in the village where I grew up, where you put the duck on the canal and raced it. Too many of those are now dying away as community standalone events organized by the community for the community. And actually fits in nicely with the guest that we have on this episode, and what Dad the Soul do, which is figuring out ways to bring together new dads and their extended families, so they can start to build that community again. Often we talk about the difference between in real life and digital and groups, but fundamentally connection is connection. There is something very nice about kind of getting families and people in the same stage of parenthood together, and also just letting the kids run riot.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about mental health today, something that more people talk about more these days. I think there's still some stigma that people feel around it, certainly in terms of paternal mental health.
Definitely with maternal mental health, but you and me both, we've took a while to find communities that we engage with. I mean, yours was far healthier. Mine was based much more about kind of catching up near the local pub, and actually now doing much more things like playing in the parks and things as well.
Let's take it back to the beginning then. You've got this baby in your arms, life has changed. What did becoming a dad feel like in the first few days? What was that expectation versus reality? Did you feel like you were ready emotionally for it?
Yeah, I don't think anyone does. I mean, you always get these lovely Instagram posts showing births going to plan and everything is like a Hollywood movie and that they were all ready and family was ready and waiting. I experienced none of that. I was just like going, "Oh crap, my life has just changed." I think it took about, particularly with my eldest, it took about a week to sink in. But I mean, it took about a week to arrive. So I think I kind of numbed a little bit during it. I mean, we had an induction, as you know, on our first, and he took like 5 days. On day one, I was really excited. And then day two was like, "Is it today?" And then day three, "Is it today?" And then day four was like, probably tomorrow at this rate. And it was. So I, I think I was ready, and then I wasn't in pretty much the same period. And pandemic as well. I mean, your first was a whole different beast in that regard. But
Yeah, it's crazy. That was what nearly 5 years ago now when we had our son, and it's hard to remember exactly how you were feeling. Certainly through the vast majority of the pregnancy, I was really, really excited. And then when lockdown came along, that adds another layer of anxiety. I think you're always thinking some nervous anticipation of what is it going to be like having a child. But then for that to happen in lockdown, where there's no support, I think was really difficult. And certainly the day he was born, it was about 3:30 in the afternoon. It was 33 degrees and there were no curtains up. So number one, we were actually roasting. So that was a little stressful. But very quickly, I was sent home on my own because of COVID restrictions. And that night, it wasn't necessarily an issue. I obviously wish I'd got to stay there longer, but I bought myself a steak and a bottle of wine
I
and kind
remember
of
that.
toasted to my son and to my wife. Then brought them home the next day, and of course, you've got this little baby who I automatically fell in love with, and it's amazing. But then you can't have people come round. You can't have your parents, his grandparents come round and hold him, and there's no support really available. When the health visitor comes round, they're wearing a mask. And to be honest, I mean, his name was Chris as well, actually. He was fantastic. He really was fantastic. But there was still that level of disconnect because they were wearing a mask. You weren't allowed to go near them. There were no support services open. And to the extent that my mental health suffered, I don't actually think it did right then. There was a level of anxiety, certainly from COVID, and making sure that he was okay, that we were okay, that we didn't do anything to put him in harm's way. But I don't think at that point my mental health did suffer. Where my mental health actually suffered was last year. So when my daughter was probably starting off when she was about 5 months old. So around Easter last year was when I had a bit of I don't know what I'd call it. I don't want to call it a breakdown, but I was certainly close to burnout. I had too many commitments going on. I think it might have been Good Friday. We were actually going on an Easter egg hunt that day, and my wife was driving, and we were in the car going to this Easter egg hunt, and I just burst out in tears. And my mother-in-law took the kids, and me and my wife just went and sat in this like bar, actually, not drinking, but just in this bar, and kind of like I just let it all out.
I know that definitely my wife, the first one with induction, had some bits that took some processing to do. But I mean, for me, the harder one was my second, because I was numb for the first month. And, my first was in neonatal, and was born 7 weeks early, and we didn't get taken home for 3 weeks after. So I'm so glad that they've now introduced the statutory requirements to give neonatal premature leave. Because that wasn't when I had mine. And when you have a preemie, you're just wandering around. There's really nothing you do. So I was ready for my second to be born. We knew what was going to happen. We knew there was the complications involved. But then when they said, oh, you literally went in for a scan on the Friday, and they went, okay, yeah, you're going to be meeting your baby on Monday. We're like, wait 1 second, just run that back again. It's 7 weeks early. What do you mean Monday? It's like, yeah, he's going to have to come out Monday. Like, and they always say it with that, we don't want you to worry. We'll have it all planned. You're like, 7 weeks early is the only number running around your brain. Was for me. And then when you're in the in the neonatal units, I mean, the midwives are just absolutely exceptional. But you're walking around like a zombie. You don't know where you go. A lot of times there aren't rooms. That kind of you have access requirements. We also did the feeding through the tube as well at some point for part of that, which is a weird experience learning that. But you just don't know how to connect. You kind of get a bit scared of connecting, and then you have to kind of relearn, that everything's okay. And that's when you discharge, you discharge. I mean, and my youngest was discharged slightly yellow. My wife was in there with him, but she wasn't a patient anymore. Like, she was still recovering from the C-section, but you had to have special permissions to be able to stay in with it. It was a weird, weird system. I think the bit to take away is, right, you can go through any one experience, but don't expect the Hollywood version, but also don't go down the rabbit hole of expecting it to be the end of the world. Let yourself be present, take it with it, but then make sure you've got like a group and somebody you can reflect with, preferably in real time. I think you kind of have to let yourself process after the fact, because you're just so in it. It's impossible to fully comprehend and process it. And it's really valuable to be able to take that time aside and actually let yourself do that work, whether that's with professional help or support, community, friends, family, whatever it may be, like you two did. It's important.
But I felt a massive sense of guilt around my mental health, like I was a bit of a burden, and thinking other people have it worse than me. Mine's because I've taken on too much, and I'm getting to grips with having a second child while also going through having a three-nager. So I think there was a period of guilt, and it was only really, I think, through going to therapy was really incredibly helpful. And oh my God, my therapy got so deep so quickly. Like, honestly, by the end of the first session, she had diagnosed exactly what the problem was and why I am the way I am, what it was in the past that was the trigger for my need to always be chasing some unobtainable high or validation through work. And my understanding of what success looked like. It was all within the first 50 minutes. I was like, all right, is this it then? And she's like, no, you're coming back. We've got more to unpack. But in that first session, it was absolutely incredible. But that really helped. And then alongside that, it sounds cliche, but starting to exercise. I joined my local running club. I started running and I cut out most alcohol. And so quickly, it really changed things for me. Also, getting rid of all of those commitments, or the vast majority of them, really, really helped, because, I was doing way too much. Finding that community, which just happened to have the added benefit of physical activity, was amazing.
And mate, you got all the better one for it. And it's like, I know on the community one is there's that bit of that cliche where they say, don't forget to date your wife, or your partner after you have children. I cannot stress enough that is true. And also the benefit of the community is that you're not also just lumping everything on the person closest to you. So my wife and I had that of we did kind of we had when we were reflecting on it, we went actually just dumping too much on each other. Because we got used to that in the pandemic, yeah, but it's a much healthier thing to give yourself space and to keep your relationship in a slightly different space. And that adage, like what you said, was I remember that being so true for me as well, is thinking that other people have it worse, so therefore my problems are not really as bad as I think. Terrible, terrible mindset to have. The second you get that feeling, actually, you should probably talk about it. It doesn't really matter who with. If you're not comfortable yet doing professional support, which I think both of us have had and which both of us would highly recommend, you get some great ones through work packages as well. If you've got those, take advantage of them. But just having a space where it's not you with your thoughts or dumping onto your partner is just incredibly important.
On that note of community and having people to talk to, male friendship is a big part of this. And it got me thinking about a message that I sent to you and Gemma in our team WhatsApp group about a month ago about close friends, or perhaps the lack of them. So I had been listening to an NFL podcast, and the male co-host, Chase Daniels, he's a former NFL quarterback, played in the league for 14 years. And he was talking about the fact that he doesn't feel that he has many friends, or not many really close friends. And I'd then seen like an Instagram post from I think it was Culture magazine, about some new writer-director who'd written a film about the transition to grown-up independence. And it got me thinking about friendship as adults. And actually, I think I said that I don't really have many close friends, and came to the conclusion that you were the only one. We've been best friends for a quarter of a century now, but you live really far away. We've got another mutual friend who lives just down the road from me, but we don't see each other a huge amount. We talk a lot and we message a lot, but I don't see him that often. My brother's close by and we're really close, but does that count if it's a member of your family? I just came to the conclusion that I don't have any close friends outside of you, which, don't get me wrong, is a fantastic friendship to have. But then I don't think I ever have done either. And there was an anecdote I shared about when I was in my early 20s. I was living at home with my mum. My brother was at uni. You were living in the US at the time, in DC. And one evening, over a glass of wine, my mum and I were talking about, well, I think she was grilling me about why I was hanging out with a certain group of people. And I just broke down in tears and said to her, I don't have any friends, and talked about how lonely and unhappy I was. And the thing that's changed is that I'm not lonely and unhappy anymore. I have incredible family. I've got you and your amazing wife. We talk every single day. But actually, not much has changed on the friendship front. And I'm not unhappy about it. But it just highlights that if, as men, we don't have a network necessarily, where are we going to find that community? And that's one of the reasons why what Dan's doing and what others are doing is so important, because it's providing a space for dads, but men in general, through other services, to really have that chance to connect and talk about their feelings. Which, if I didn't have you, I'm not quite sure, apart from obviously my brother as well, who I'd turn to. I've got friends through, I've got friends through football, I've got parenting friends, but they're not close friends. We don't hang out outside of if we're all hanging out with our wives as a big group as well. So, yeah, it just got me thinking, and I think it's, in terms of the conversation we're having today with Dan, I think it was quite relevant. How do you feel about your friendships?
It's about the same, to be honest, particularly as you kind of move into parenting. You often lose a few of your who you previously thought were kind of really close friends because they're just not in the same chapter of life, and that's okay. But also, I definitely learned that you need to kind of then double down on not necessarily trying to replace them, but being willing to be vulnerable and open it up again, because a lot of your friendships are built over a long period of time. There's like some research more about like how many hours it would take you to develop an acquaintance versus a friend versus a close friend, and then a lot of that is just building up enough trust and enough confidence to be vulnerable and share things that actually really matter, because you don't build a close friend by keeping it shallow. You can go to the football match every Sunday with somebody and they're talking this like really famous about the issue of male suicide, and they were showing it there, and it's the person who you think looks depressed is actually the one who isn't.
Yeah, that was
Things can
really
be very
striking. That
deceiving.
was.
Yeah. And there's this bit about ask twice, if people are okay and fine, which is a great initiative. Things like Calm, the campaign against living miserably, I think if I remember the acronym right, which is all about loneliness as well. Um, but don't put off doing things, even if they're short. Put time aside, make things semi-regular. Don't just rely on it being the pub. Guys, we do this way too much. Or yeah, I'll just go see you down the pub, and then you just sit and drink, you don't talk, at the very minimum. But that's not always the best route. The social event is important, not the social lubricant, shall I say, on that one. Although Scott Galloway has some points on that one, going actually it can, if you use it properly and correctly, and it's about the social environment, not about the alcohol. That's good. That's a good, healthy relationship to have. It's about creating those circumstances where you can do things like the walking club, whatever it is. Just set up something with a group, and make it not the same person every time, and be willing to chat and talk. That's really the best advice I think both of us can give. And again, joining communities like Dad La Soul is, start somewhere, start small, give it a couple of goes. Don't just go once and think it's going to work. No, that's not how any of these things function. It's not how friends are made. Just kind of be willing to put yourself out there and realize that it's okay for you to change groups within chapters of life. Don't cut people out, but understand what that friendship brings to both of you as well.
So we've looked at the data, we've shared our own stories, but what does it actually look like to build something real around this? To take the quiet struggles that so many dads face and turn them into a movement, a space, a community? That brings us to our guest, Dan Flanagan. Dan is the founder of Dad La Soul, an award-winning UK-based social enterprise that's redefining what modern fatherhood looks like. What started as a small group of dads just trying to connect has grown into a full-blown grassroots movement, blending music, storytelling, and creativity to tackle the isolation and mental health challenges that so often come with being a dad today. He's a writer, an activist, TED speaker, a dad himself, and someone who's been incredibly open about the highs and lows of parenting and why we need to make a space for conversations like this one. Let's take a listen. We're really delighted today to be joined by Dan Flanagan, who is the founder of Dad La Soul. And according to his bio on his website, he's also a part-time revolutionary, hat-wearing, tea-drinking dreamer and doer. So welcome to the podcast, Dan.
I write these things, I put it out there, and I forget that other people have access to them. So yeah, I am a tea-drinking, hat-wearing, part-time revolutionary. Thank you for having me, boys.
No, thank you. And we can see that now. You've got your hat on, you've got your cup of tea. You're a dad, first and foremost. So if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about your family, your experiences of fatherhood.
Yeah. I am a co-parent now of a very nearly 13-year-old, which has challenges, shall we say. You find yourself arguing with a mini version of yourself, and then you realise you have a lot more sympathy for your parents, which was a big eye-opener. So yeah, it didn't start out that way. I was happily married. But then, things change, and there's always something to learn. I think we do ourselves a bit of a disjustice where we look at other people, especially on social media, that seem to have it all sussed out, and we measure ourselves against that. Actually, I went to another men's group, Sea Swim and Sauna, on a Sunday morning, and I was talking to this guy that he'd been to one of our events a couple of years ago. I'd met him briefly, and then we started having this really sort of quite open, in-depth conversation. I was like, he's like, "What, you struggle with that? But you're there as a..." Yes, everybody does. We just need to be a bit more honest about the fact there is no rule book.
When you found out you were going to be a dad, what were your expectations? Did you have any preconceptions when you were expecting? What kind of support was out there?
It's strange because I knew I always wanted to be a father. I knew I was going to have a boy. It was preordained. So when the realization hit me, it was challenging. Because I built up this picture in my head of just how wonderful it was going to be, and then I realised how exhausting it was. My background is, from a professional point of view, is sort of marketing and PR, and I just left a directorship of an agency, and I'd started my own business probably a couple of weeks before my son was born, which is appalling timing considering it. But it was like, right, now is the time. If I'm going to jump ship and do something, I'm going to do this for you. But yeah, it was exhausting. I think I probably took 3 or 4 days paternity leave, but even during that I was working, trying to keep the ship afloat, because I thought my role was a provider. I was there to keep the roof over their head, so trying to juggle everything was particularly hard, but I didn't recognise at the time. It was like, must do this, man, dig in deep, sleeps for wimps. Yeah, I'd kind of still unfortunately brought into the hustle culture mentality, where you I'm doing 70 hours a week and it's a badge of honour. And I know that's terrible now.
That's how things were, though, wasn't it? It used to be a flex to boast about how many hours you were doing, and the fact that you might skip meals. You're only living on coffee.
Yeah.
Also on that is, you've been in the media world similar to me, and the idea of less than 50, 60-hour weeks is not the norm. Still today. I mean, back then certainly wasn't. I remember reading that you did some of the early brand briefs about fathers being babysitters, and you had project briefs where you challenged that, and then a story about having to do a change of your child's nappy in a supermarket on the floor because there was no facilities for dads, which is still something. So there's a famous anecdote that you have about quitting your job 9 years ago and then going on a dinosaur hunt instead to start it all off. It's like, walk through what that change was like, and then also how that kind of change shaped everything else. I mean, it's one thing to quit a job anyway, but you were doing really well. It wasn't just that you quit a job, it's you were quitting a career path that you were excelling at.
So, to dial right back, so when my son was very early, I started my own agency. I did that for a couple of years, had some amazing time, but also really, really challenging time. I had a period towards the last sort of 3 months where all of my client roster disappeared within a matter of weeks. Through nothing I've done, it just happened, and it was terrifying. And I thought we were going to go bankrupt, and it took me to some very dark places, shall we say. But then I didn't know what to do. I certainly didn't know how to ask for help. But then I got an offer from a large agency. Said, look, can you come in and do what you do, but train our team? So, okay, well, somebody's actually going to pay me a salary to do this. I don't have to invoice clients. I don't have to chase things. Okay. So, I did that for, 18 months. And on the face of it, it's really good. Big clients, very trendy Brighton offices, beanbags, foosballs, all of that. But I absolutely hated it. I was older than quite a lot of the people I was working with. They had no idea what parenting was. And it made me ill. I'd leave very early in the morning, so I'd come home late at night. I felt I built into this, I must be a provider, I must pay bills, put food on table, mango hunt. And at the time, my dad had passed away as well, so he was very ill for quite a long time. But when he passed, I didn't recognise the effect that had on me, and I sort of almost tried to ignore it, went back to work for 6 months, and then it came and hit me like a steam train, and I became very, very ill. My son gave me chickenpox as an adult because I was so worn down. Then I had to stop. I physically I could not go to the office, I could not do anything, I just had to stop. And it was during that time where I realised I played with him a lot more, because I was sort of confined to barracks. I was like, this is really nice. I want to do more. I don't want to get up really early before you're in bed, or come home and be grumpy. So I ended up quitting, and I was going to have a couple of months just to get well, just to recover, give myself a bit of time. But then it snowballed. I was blogging at the time because there was a wealth of mummy bloggers back in the day. I think Mumsnet was going through the roof. They were being courted by Gordon Brown. But it was, when I was looking for help, there was nothing out there. Nothing like you guys are doing now. So it's like, why does this not exist? I cannot be the only one. So I started writing. The blog turned into a magazine. That's where the content side of it is, because I was thinking, right, we were getting these creative briefs through from brands, and they were terrible. Really, really bad narratives of dad dancing. I was like, no. I can do it better myself. So we set up the Don't Believe the Hype, which was the world's first agency of dad. And I realised there was a load of dads out there that were also freelancing that I could bring together under an agency banner that were filmmakers, radio producers, journalists, and we could do it a lot better than quite a few agencies out there. So that gave us the opportunity not to go back to corporate world, do the school run or the nursery run. And yeah, I think it was a couple of weeks in after I'd quit, I started volunteering at my son's nursery, which made me feel like a rock star. Let's be brutally honest, right? There is a man here. The kids, whoa! There's a man with a hat. Whoa! And then he said, "Oh, we're looking for parents to help out." I was like, "Fuck yeah, sign me up." So myself and some proper grown-ups took these kids out to the beach, and I had convinced all the kids that we were going dinosaur hunting. And I realised it was a Monday morning, and a couple of weeks beforehand, I would have been in a strategy meeting for one of the largest high street banks, who were my main client, which were the agency's largest account, multi-million pound budgets. But I would have been in a room talking about credit cards. Essentially, my job was to get people to buy credit cards creatively. So my job is to get people in debt. But here I am on a dinosaur hunt. This is so much more fun. I want to do more of this. So I was able to use my skills and my background to build a bit more of a flexible lifestyle. I'm a big believer in the universe listening. So a couple of months later, I was in a coffee shop and there was this guy in the corner looked a bit sad and lonely. I thought, my thing now is I'm going to talk to strangers. Before, I don't have the time to talk to strangers. And I went over and introduced myself to this chap, got talking, and he told me about his dream was to set up a new fostering agency, because he said the fostering agency system is very broken. He's got these big ideas. So, mate, you need to meet my wife. She feels exactly the same. I did. They ended up forming with a partnership. My then wife went back to work full time, and I was able to do a lot more of the childcare. So the roles were reversed, and that would not have happened had I not been in that coffee shop, had I been tied into the corporate world. So it was like,
and was it that dinosaur hunt on the beach that was essentially the kernel of an idea that then blossomed into Dadler Soul? Or was that a bit too simplistic?
Further along, I was still writing and I was still creating content. But I was also seeing the challenges on a Saturday, which is traditionally a dad day. I'd go down the park. Mums can have a conversation, exchange numbers, organise a play date. I'd be stuck on my own, or I'd take my son to soft play, and everybody be on their phone. And it's just like, this is lonely. Started going to mum and toddler groups. Nah, man, was not a safe space. Was not a healthy space. This can just be better. There just has to be. So I reached out to a mate of mine who's got a lovely office in the centre of Brighton. I said, look, can I have your office on a Saturday? They had DJ decks in there already. Bring us some soft play and let's just do something. So that was the very first dad's play date, and it was 14 dads, 20 kids turned up, no mums, and I've never been anywhere like this. Normally, when I see a certain group of dads, it would be at a kid's birthday party. The mums would be taking over. The dads would withdraw to the kitchen, and they'd be just stuck in really socially awkward conversations about, did you see the match, or what car are you driving, or how busy as well. I don't drive, I don't understand the offside rule, and I'm essentially self-unemployed. So I'm out of here, mate. So that was the kernel. When I saw these potentially blokes that were strangers, nobody was on the phone, and they were talking, it's like, this is something. I don't know what this is, but this is something. And that was 500 and something events ago.
But quite incredible for the first one to get that many people come along and to be that well received straight off the bat. That's That's pretty good going
I
for a
think it
first
shows
attempt.
the need.
Yeah.
And it was a real mix of demographics as well. So that
How
was
did
really lovely.
how long did it take to stabilize until you got a core group coming through? Because you have some great case studies and stories about people who come regularly every week can, and
Yeah.
also people who have become volunteers or leads in their own right. But on the support front, it's something that Paul and I both know well. Is Paul's eldest was born during the pandemic when support was impossible because you were bubbled. I think it was even before that became official. I lost my parents before I had my eldest, so it's like my family network was my in-laws who were amazing. I was lucky on that front, but it's a strange thing when you've not got your immediate family, or if you've not got immediate friends and shoulders, and to try and do it with strangers is a hard thing, particularly for guys. We're not good, or we're certainly not brought up to believe that asking for help is a strength. We're brought up to think that's not manly. It's a weakness. It's if you ask for help and can't do it on your own, you've failed. And asking for it repeatedly and off strangers is just not a normal thing. It's definitely getting better. People have done some amazing work with it, you included. But how did you get it to self-reinforce? How's the challenge of getting people then to become volunteers in their own right, take some ownership and autonomy themselves as well?
I think it was almost a natural development because it wasn't, I'm going to do an event and this is a business or this is a thing. So I just want to do this. Top Rocking Beats, which was the other side of the business. So I was putting on large scale family raves in the afternoon. So I had mates that were DJs, stuff like that. Come and have a huge party in the afternoon, back by bath and bedtime. But we'd moved out of Brighton over to Worthing. So I was like, moving back to the 70s. I'm moving back to the suburbia. Hate it. And it was really lonely. The group of friends that we had at the time were people that my ex-wife had met through the thing. And that's your social life. Now, they were lovely people, but they weren't my people. And it was quite lonely. But I think there's a, Sam Delaney calls it, so it's almost like a middle-class guilt. That you've got the nice house, you've got the job, but what have you actually got to complain about? But deep down, I knew there was something missing. I did the first couple of events, and then we did some pop-ups in. We took over museums, art galleries, and then I found a site. Actually, we still use it. Bless it, called Guild Care, which at the time was an old folks' day centre that I went along and did some volunteering at, and had a nice garden and a cafe all in. I was like, right, what are you doing? What happens here on a Saturday? They went, nothing. I was like, well, can I have the keys on a Saturday? Because if you've got the capacity to bring a wheelchair in, I've got the capacity to bring a pushchair in. They went, yeah, fine. So we started doing events there, and more and more people turned up, and they just became regulars. And it has got ebbs and flows because obviously they first of all come for the needs of their own kids, but then when it gets to maybe 6 or 7, the kids have got football teams or other activities, so they tend to drift away, and then another group of lads comes in. But it was a nice core bunch, and it was quite light touch. All the stuff was stored in a mate of mine's garage, so we packed his garage full of soft play and stuff, and then I'd have to, every Saturday morning I'd go and get a taxi, get to the garage, pull the stuff out, go there, entertain other people's kids for a couple of hours, drop it back, and that was exhausting. But it grew, and then other opportunities came along to do new locations, and then COVID hit, and that was really, really hard. I lost probably 98% of the other trustees. It all became very toxic and horrible. They left. Most of the volunteers left. I went out and had to get another job because it wouldn't sustain me, and I wasn't sleeping very well, and being locked down and stuff. I was on my own quite a lot of the time, and I remember about 3 o'clock in the morning breaking down in tears and going, right, I cannot manage a full-time job and this lockdown thing and build Dad LaSalle. But it's like, I have to, because no matter how bad I feel, there will be other people feeling worse. So I had to sort of, again, go back to square one and rebuild it. But then new people came along, such as Stuart, who's the MD of Edge Tea and Coffee. He saw a poster of ours in a park one day, came along, and they've stuck with us. And what we also decided to do, we've got a very active WhatsApp chat. And then somebody just put in there one night or one day, look, does anybody fancy a pint? Because I haven't been out for ages. So, yeah. So, we've got 40 people in a pub. Like, some of these guys are making a 3-hour round trip to come to a strange pub with a bunch of strangers. So I think we ended up doing that 8 weeks on a row, and it built it. But then I thought, it must be really hard to walk into a strange pub, see this group of lads all laughing and joking. Somebody that is quite socially awkward, I would find that intimidating. Also, what happens if you don't drink? Or what happens if you can't afford to buy a round? So I need another space. So I reached out to a lovely lad called John, who runs a chain of co-working spaces across the southeast. Said, can I have your keys on a Thursday night, please? He went, yeah. So we've been meeting there, which then doesn't matter if you don't drink. It's a private space, but a nice community space. So we're not in a church hall. And we bring the decks in, the VR, board games. Get sponsored by lovely people like Stu that give us decent coffee and decent beer, and the fellas just come together, and that's nice because they're people not only that have come to the play date, but the ones that their kids have got older and left the play dates, but they still want the community, or maybe they can't come to the play dates because they don't have their kids that weekend, or they're doing shift work, and it's almost like another community has blossomed off the side of that.
The bit I find really interesting on there, Dan, as well, is you kept experimenting. So a lot of times people find something that works and that's all they ever do. That they never dare to do anything extra or different. So in COVID, you started doing the Dad the Soul sessions with the YouTube. You said the VR one there, which I found was quite an interesting thing. You've done Earth Wars recently with the Outdoor Project, which I generally am a bit jealous of. That actually just looks like crackingly good fun. You kept changing and innovating bits around while still doing the core stuff. Have there been any lessons you've learned by experimenting there that are either kind of positive or negative on that? Is balancing the different competing ideas or demands? Because sometimes you have to prep for success as much as you have to prepare for it not working out. I think sometimes people kind of get nervous then about trying to swap things up, keep things fresh.
So I think it's a mixture. One, I think, is down to my ability or disability, should we say, with my ADHD. I get bored very easily. Like, that sounds good. Let's just do it. Oh, can we take over that museum? Can we take over that farm? Can we take over that art gallery? Other bits will be that somebody within the community will have a contact or make a recommendation. I'm into this. And it's almost like the dads lead the agenda. The thing where, we have experienced, so lockdown, like everybody, we moved on to Zoom, but then we realised Zoom got very boring very quickly. Yeah, you're working from Zoom, you're homeschooling on Zoom. Do you actually want to social live on it? No. One of the dads gave us a couple of grand. We were able to bring some decent software in. And we did, I'm quite proud of this actually, the world's first international play date. So we had dads in the States, Africa, Germany, Czech Republic coming in. There's a beautiful moment there. There's a white kid in Scotland talking to a black kid in Africa about what lockdown looks like for them. It was just
really cool,
profound. But then obviously lockdown ended and nobody wants online events anymore. So I go back to reality. I've done events where there's been me and 2 other people. We've done all this marketing, all this stuff. But then one of those taught me a real lesson. Because this is just failure. How dare you? And I was talking to this lad, because obviously it's a smaller group, I had a better chance to talk. And he said, I've not spoken to another grown up in 6 weeks. Thank you.
wow.
Look, this is the power of showing up. So it was a check on my ego, because then, I've done other events and there's been 1,300 people there. That's how I judge success. But it's not.
Yeah, it's about the impact you can have, isn't it?
Yeah, so the lessons learned is, what's the worst that can happen? As long as nobody dies. Especially children, because that would be quite bad PR, let's be honest. Some activities like the Nerf Wars, they go really well. Because normally if you take your kids to activities, you're waiting in the car or you're around on your phone waiting for them to finish. And I remember the first one, I was like, no, you're getting involved. And I'm what? That's what, yeah. And suddenly they embrace it in the Rambo. War paint over there, diving in the bushes. Right? This is war. Right? Dad's versus kid. No prisoners. I don't care if you love your children. We are going to capture their flag. So, yeah. And the kids saw a very different side to their dads and they let off the steam. So now we do those. Yeah, we've done them for maybe the last 5 or 6 years, as an annual thing. So it's taken up so much now that we're doing 2 a month as a separate thing. So that's outside of the play dates and stuff. So yeah, the lesson learned is you got to basically try things, break things in the way of, like Steve Jobs, go there, try it, break it. As long as it's not a child, we're
Worst that
okay.
can happen.
And you realise not every dad is the same. We've got very different backgrounds. We'll have very different postcodes, very different pay slips, very different interests. So it's like there's a dad that will come along and says, "Oh, you do that, right? You're volunteering the next session," or somebody will go, "Oh, I've got nothing to offer. I'm not a cool DJ, or I'm not this." You can still turn up half an hour earlier and put the chairs out, and then you find that they do have skills, but maybe they've forgotten. We tend to lose ourselves as we get older. We lose ourselves as people because we're there as a provider, as a partner, as a father. Yeah, but what actually are you interested in? What would you like to do? So, the last couple of months we invested in some record players. So the event's like, okay, come along, but bring a 12-inch or an album, stick it on there. Tell me who you were when you were 16. And suddenly you've got people from very different backgrounds. You were at that gig, you were at that rave, and suddenly there's a new friendship that's joined, rather than going, "Oh, we're only going to talk about nappies and parenthood."
You've talked about some of the ups and downs and how it's evolved over the years. What's next for Dadler Soul? Have you got any exciting things on the horizon?
Global domination.
Excellent.
But one of the
Genuinely.
things that I've always been impressed with you, Dan, is that you've not been a flash in the pan. You've kept going and grafting out, and you've got chapters. I remember when we last chatted, you've got chapters in New Zealand, US, I think Belgium, even of all bits, where that happened organically, though. How are you going to keep that going to a social enterprise, which we completely forgot to say up top? It's just keeping going as long as you have is hard as heck.
Yeah. That's another this thing of ours, to use a mafia term, has just grown and grown and grown, and it's beautiful to see people from very different backgrounds, from very different cultures, that they are listening to us, they are hearing us, and go, yeah, it's like this in South Africa, it's like this in the Maori community. It's like this when I went over to the Bronx last year. I was meeting guys over there that they saw the top and go, Dadder Soul. And then we have a conversation. It's like, yeah, I get it.
What is it in your opinion that's actually moved the needle that means that people are seeking out Dadler Soul, or they're seeking out the ability to become take up share parental leave? What's the big insight, the $1 million insight?
That's a very wide question, and I think it's also from a cultural perspective, that has been an eye opener. Because I'm a white middle-aged man in quite a prosperous part of the southeast, and then we did an event actually on Saturday down in Brighton, and there was a Rich Ford, who's a children's author, came and did a reading and stuff, and he emailed me this morning. He said there was actually, gave him the chance because there was 3 or 4 dads there with children at a dual heritage, and they had a completely different conversation. I think culturally, I did some work with Sussex Uni actually, and they were talking actually certain parts of the Muslim community. You do not look your elders or your father in the eye, because it's a massive sign of disrespect, which is in complete reverse to everything we've heard in Western society, where it's eye-to-eye contact and you're on your hands and knees. So there's almost a generational cultural shift happening there that you need to be aware of. I think the key thing was probably COVID, in a horrible way, where people got a chance to work from home and see the different side to the fact that they could work from home, but also they maybe saw that their partners didn't have it that easy. They also saw what they could miss out on. So I think had that not happened, I'd still think we would be back several years ago. So out of all of the horrors and the abject travesty and tragedy that was there, I think that was a clear turning point for people, especially men, to go, actually, I want to do things differently.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. We've seen so much when we've been doing our own research and looking into different projects. That the pandemic really was a turning point, and hopefully things carry on going in the same direction that they are at the moment. Final question, Dan. We all head into fatherhood and parenthood blind without any previous experience. If there's one thing that you could say to a dad who is expecting their first child imminently, or a piece of advice, what would it be?
Stick your hand up and ask for help at the earliest opportunity. Do not blag your way through it, right? It's really, really bloody hard. Don't feel foolish because you don't know. It's because nobody's taken the time to teach you. Understand that it isn't just a female thing where your hormones are going to be up and down and through the roof. I remember vividly, it was probably 5 or 6 days after my son was born, and he was just lying beside me, and I was on the laptop working, and I just looked at him, and it was almost like my heart exploded. I was like, you are the most beautiful thing that I have ever seen in my life. I now understand I would die for you. Right? And I don't do that sort of emotional nonsense. So yeah, the advice is, it ain't easy, lads. So seek out a community, friends, that thankfully with the work you guys are doing, there are more resources out there. But don't be one of these guys that will go to IKEA, get a shelving unit and not read the instructions, right? Because you'll miss some screws. Same with fatherhood. Actually find out, some instructions first of all. Make sure you've got the tools to put the shelves up so they actually stand.
Couldn't agree more. Dan Flanagan, thank you very much. And that's our show for today. You can find links to Dadless Soul and other mental health support services for dads in the show notes. Father Z is produced by Gemma Lothian, Chris Marchant and Paul Rhodes. It's edited by Paul Rhodes. Our music is by Christos Politis. You can find information, guidance and support on our website, fathercraft.co.uk, and that's also where you can sign up to our Father Z platform, read our blog and find product reviews. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and leave us a 5-star rating so other dads can find us. It really does help. Thanks for listening.